Attention on deck. Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your hosts, Kellord, Kami Samurai, and Vanacera.
Hello and welcome to episode 74 of the Warships Podcast. I'm your host, Kellord, and Kami is with me today as we have a special guest, Izolate, back from EU, back on the show. Welcome back, Izo.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So Vanessa is actually on vacation this week, so we're wishing her well, so she has a good time off because she works pretty hard. But recently you were invited by Wargaming to stream the finals of the Cross-Atlantic King of the Sea tournament from the Wargaming EU office in Paris with Flamu. So how did all of that kind of come about, and how did it go down?
Oh man, it's like an anti-vacation. It was all work, no play almost. But yeah, how it came about is I've been part of the EU competitive scene since its infancy. I think the first real big thing, or the first big tournament, was the OMC, the Omni Community Cup or something like that. And I did my first cast there, and then it's just been going ever since. So I don't know. I do kind of consulting, I guess, to the King of the Sea thing as far as what's going to work streaming wise and such. A little bit of input.
Gotcha. So you were streaming with Flamu, and he's a bit of a controversial figure among many people. Could you give us some insight into kind of what makes him tick?
What makes him tick? Bad Warships player. I think that ticks all of our boxes, right?
Fair enough. But I guess I'm more like, what's he like? You've met him now, so like, what's he like?
Pretty Scandinavian, I would say. Like somber, like, I don't know, private, I guess is the best way of putting it. We're all kind of like that, where we don't really. You need to get under someone's skin in a sense. Like you need to learn some. Or how do I put this? More like you can't just have a quick introduction to a Scandinavian person and then you're best buds. You have to kind of grow in each other a bit. But we had a good time. We shared some common interests, if you would.
Fair enough. Potatoes, by chance?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe a little bit.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the KOTS finals? And I guess, were you surprised by any of the way that things went down? Were you surprised by any of the tactics that got used or the compositions or anything like that?
That's a big question. Like, if there was something that surprised me, match-wise, I mean, this is for the first time, it was actually a lot more, I don't know, how do you put it? It's much more interesting to watch, both from a caster and spectator point of view, but also from an audience standpoint, because the change to tier 10, combined with the smoke shooting changes, with the concealment being, not proxy detection to smoke, it just made it all so much more dynamic, and there is actually action going on, and you can see ships of the enemy team. So I think it's a huge improvement. And as far as the matches go, go ahead.
I guess in regards to the smoke specifically, it makes it more difficult to kind of force your battleships into places, where they may not or should not be, or farther ahead than and pushing types of things. Did you see a lot of battleships in the back? Did you see a lot of pushing battleships? I guess what was the kind of meta there in terms of interacting between battleships and smoke?
Before, you mean, or after the changes?
No, I'm talking about in this most recent KOTS.
The teams have to be way more careful with their positioning. Smoke is no longer you cannot see me button for however long the US Navy destroyer timer is, depending on tier, of course. So just more dynamic, more push and pull. Whereas before it was just like, there's two big blobs of smoke shooting at each other, and they see each other if they have radar or hydro, or when they relocate to pop another smoke closer or further away from the enemy. So it's just more movement, more across the map, less stationary, and visually a lot more interesting. And tactically as well, and strategically, of course.
Do you think it made it more interesting for people to kind of watch and for you to cast?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Like before, with the previous King of the Sea, it was always like, where are they going to utilize their smoke? How are their destroyers? Are their destroyers going to smoke up their ships and then go cap? Oh, pardon me. Or are they going to like crawl up slowly, which is what we saw from a lot of teams, is that they just crept up under the cover of smoke and then this like leapfrog smokes forward. Now it's more like if they use smoke, they do it as a defensive tool, but not as like the linchpin in their tactic. So a lot more ships in the open, a lot more damage traded, which makes angling and positioning a lot more important than what it used to be, because they could just hide in smoke. So it's a vastly different, for like a positive thing for sure.
So Warships has been decried in the past as not really fast enough and not really dynamic enough to be an esport. Do you think that the changes to smoke are enough to push it into that kind of esport realm possibility, or do you think that it's still too slow?
I think calling it an esport is, I don't think Warships will ever reach that point. I mean, I want the best for the game, and especially the competitive scene, as good as possible, as big and as grand and as fun to play for the players as possible. But we also have to be realistic. It is a very niche game. A lot of people play it, but fewer. Well, actually, now with clan battles kicking off, this is the second season you started. I think more people will get into the really min-max and the higher level of gameplay that is required to play clan battles, for example. But I don't think we can ever get like the esport of World of Warships, because like you said, it's slow. And I think that's a good thing. I prefer it that way, the slow tactical instead of just split-second decisions. And I don't know, if you want to compare it to, I don't know, first-person shooter, or I don't know, League of Legends, where it's a bit of a lull and then everything happens at once. In World of Warships, you can see minutes into the future, depending on how good you are at predicting the game. Even in random battles, when you just play, you can really tell how things are going to play out, and it all depends on like initial positioning, tactics, and such. So I prefer the slow one, but yeah.
So it's more of a chess game then?
In a manner of speaking, yeah. You could compare it to that.
What about you, Kami? I mean, where do you think World of Warships is in terms of esport viability, with the most recent KOTS and then with clan battles in the game and things like that?
I think it's, like Iso said, I don't know if it'll ever be League of Legends or anything like that, because it is very niche, like you guys are talking about. But do I think it was fun to watch KOTS, a tier 10 with, all the strategy going on? I really liked it. But I think it's only going to appeal to the people that like the game and people that, appeal to that want to watch ships and want to watch things like that. I don't know if it's going to appeal to the everyday gamer, if that makes sense, the console gamer, or, people that just play first person shooters. I don't know if it's going to really look to them, but if you like ships or planes or tanks or something, I think you'll get viewership from them. But will it ever become a full blown esport? I don't see it, unless, Wargaming decides to do like KOTS, but it not ran by, the EU server, the NA server, but it's actually ran completely 100% by Wargaming. And I don't know if that's, budget wise or anything like that, going to really work out the way they want, because viewership's important, right? Like, you got to have a market to sell that to. But clan battles is a step, I think, in the right direction. Because I know, like our clan was taking a break after the last season of clan battles and Supremacy League and everything. But now that clan battles has came back, everybody's ramped back up. Everybody wants to play. So I think for the player base, clan battles and King of the Sea are good for the people that really care. But when you think about it, Iso, what do you think the percentage of competitive players are, in terms of the player base overall?
Are you talking about like full on competitive, or people that might enjoy clan battles casually?
Full on competitive, people that would go for quote unquote an esport.
Oh, that's going to be a small percentage of the player base. I don't know. I mean, I can guesstimate, but that's not even going to get close, I guess. Maybe 5% of the EU server, for example, or I'm not sure if that's actually an interesting point. Like, is there the same level of interest in it across all the servers, or is it? But anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But it can't be more than a few percent of the, if we're talking about the entire server population.
Well, I guess one of the things that I was really surprised by is just how many people participated in clan battles in the first season. Like, the number was much higher than I expected it to be.
I mean, it makes sense. There are some rewards for clan battles, is there not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's flags and salt. But I guess I guess I wasn't expecting it to be quite as popular as it was, at least the first time out.
No, but it's something new. And the first, because we had that team battle season way back in the beginning, and then there was the lull of not anything that wasn't community driven or made in the training rooms. The only thing we had was ranked and team playing ranked and all that stuff, right? But then now with the first clan battle season, that kind of really, I think people are just looking for something new. And especially, you can only go into a division with 3 people, and having the ability to grab even more of your friends and playing, I think that speaks to certain people, I suppose. And to be completely honest, I have played no clan battles at all. None. Nil. It just doesn't interest me.
I'm curious as to why not, because you are seem to be interested in the competitive side of Warships. What about clan battles makes it uninteresting to you, and something like KOTS be interesting?
Oh, that's a really good question. Clan battles for me is, I don't know, man. It's just not something that I really enjoy. And on the same note, I've been asked to join a few competitive teams, but it's the same thing there. It's like it's not really for me, I guess. And I don't know exactly. I can't tell you like, oh, it's because X, Y, and Z reason. It's just not. When I think about Warships, that's not for me. I don't mind commentating over competitive. I think that's great fun, but playing, not so much for me.
Fair enough. So we're going to move on a little bit. This week, in collaboration with the new Global Community Contributor Program run by South Octavian, Gascogne will receive a buff to its reload rate, bringing it down from 30 seconds to 28 seconds. On top of the buff to Sigma, this is kind of hoped to bring Gascogne into a really desirable territory for a premium ship. I guess, Izzo and Kami, what did you think about A, the process of how this came to be, and B, if 28-second reload is enough for Gascogne to be considered good enough?
Want to take the lead on this one, Kami, or should I?
Go ahead, man. You're the guest.
All right. Well, I was kind of hoping you would, but I have played a few matches in the Gascogne. I'm kind of coming back to Warships from a 2.5-ish month of a break. So I've just been excited to play the normal ships. But the Gascogne is, my impression is that it's a ship without an identity. It has the mobility of a cruiser-ish. It has the weird firepower that is not accurate, and then it has the armor with the relatively protected citadel, but the huge like upper hull. So it's like, do you go in close with it and get slam dunked by AP, or do you try to do the whole long range spam thing with it? It's like the stats of the ship kind of sends conflicting messages. And as to your question is 28-second reload gonna be such a huge turnaround for it? Maybe, but I would probably still, if I load up that ship, it's gonna be like, how do I play this? Because I don't know the identity of it, if that makes sense.
Well, I guess, and I'm sure Kami's going to jump in on this in a minute because he really liked France, but it's very similar in the gross characteristics to France, just with smaller guns. So I guess, did you not like France when you tested her? Which, by the way, is going to be changed to the Republic, according to one of the releases today.
So leading back to the whole break thing, I think I managed to get 2 games in, and that was in the evening when I was down in Paris. And there might have been some beers involved, so my experience from that might not be close to what it should be.
Like, how many beers are we talking? Like 2 to 3, 5 to 10?
Enough beers from where my stats go purple to, like, I don't know, green.
he wasn't hitting the W key. We know that for sure.
No, but I barely got to play any of the friendship, so I'm gonna have to pass that to Kami completely.
Yeah, I can understand the whole break thing. I know for a fact I was on a break too, and I just came back pretty much when the French battleships were given to us for testing and everything. But the Gascogne, I like the France, or what is it now, the Republic.
Republic.
But the Gascogne, 28 seconds. I mean, that's awesome, I guess. 2 seconds. But I feel like, again, this goes back to the whole Richelieu issue and where the Richelieu and the Gascogne, I just have an issue with the way that they're implementing the game because of the different styles. But the Gascogne, 28 seconds, it'll help it, but I don't know, like you said, it's a ship without an identity. I think it's still there. It's not a ship that you can bow on. It's not a ship that you can reliably punch out cruisers, which in a battleship you want to be able to do. Because sometimes with that ship you get some wonky dispersion. And if you're in a fight where you're going towards the battleship but they're going towards you, I just don't know if you're going to win that fight. You don't have anything. I mean, I guess your secondaries are okay, but I mean, that's not going to really win you the fight. I don't know. It's just it's a weird ship. And I don't know what they can do to fix it. And on the case of the Republique, it has bigger guns. So you get better, you get better penetration, you get better gun performance than the Gascogne. So I don't know. And it's not like it's a ship that, because tier 8 used to be the competitive meta. We all know that, right? And that used to be kind of like the standard. You'd be like, is this ship able to go play competitive? And now that it's moved to tier 10, that's not necessarily an issue. So I guess it could be seen as a ship that you could play for fun and every once in a while take out. But is it a ship that you're going to be like, oh, I want to go play 10 battles in it, like, the North Carolina? That I don't know. And it's only going to appeal to certain players because if you look at it, with a turret in the front and a turret in the back, a lot of people are going to struggle with that layout. It's not easy to do. And it takes a player that is willing to learn the ship and learn how to play the game correctly to make that ship really, I guess, what would it be? A high skill? Would it be a floor or would it be a ceiling? Kalorn?
If you're talking about that, it's difficult for the average person to jump into, probably a high skill floor. But I think that it's actually it could have a pretty high skill ceiling as well, in the fact that you can do a lot of things with it because just how fast
that was the only really thing that stood out to me. It's the ability to reposition, like, because we all know how random battles play. Like sometimes if you have the situational awareness and you're willing to not shoot for a while, sometimes you just need to relocate. If you want to win the match, you need to be on the other side of the map, or and that's kind of where it shines, I guess, the mobility of it. And it's also pretty nice to just know that you can close the distance to any other battleship. Sure, they're gonna absolutely trash your bow due to overmatching, but you still have you can punch that light speed button should you need it.
Yeah, and I believe it has decent torpedo protection, right? It's not anything like special, but I don't believe it's terrible.
But it also really was one of the easier battleships to dodge torpedoes, and because of the speed boost helping it turn, and actually a pretty decent turning speed.
Yeah, it's by far one of the more mobile battleships in the game right now. So just due to the fact, it's like shooting. If you're in a battleship and you're trying to hit French cruisers, they've been out for a while, but I still, they still catch me off guard.
The Henri, yeah, the Henri.
I still have a hard time.
Yeah, like you think like, oh, this is about yay is where I need to shoot, and then you just should have put like, I don't know, 2 more seconds of lead on them. And I feel like maybe that's the case with the Gascogne and dodging torpedoes. Like destroyers is like, wait a minute, why do I have to lead that much? No, I'm going to shoot a bit shy of the lead,
Yeah, and the thing with the speed boost is, you could be going along at normal top speed, then all of us, in a destroyer fires torpedoes, you hit the speed boost and they're gone. And they might not even know that torpedoes were fired at them. It just happens that, they hit the speed boost and there they go. I guess the real thing is, do you guys see anything better about the Gascogne than the Richelieu? I mean, that because they're the tier 8s. Different gun setup, of course. But, I mean, is there anything that you look at the Gascogne and you're like, I want to play that more than the Richelieu, I guess, is kind of...
Well, Gascogne to me is a dynamic playstyle ship. Like, you move around a lot in Gascogne. When I played Richelieu, I was not moving much. Like, you get to a position, you get to a strategic location, and you hold it, and then you push forward when you have the advantage, or you back up when you're getting attacked. That was Richelieu to me. And because there's no reason to show your broadside. There's no reason to show your back. You have guns on the front and you use them. So to me, it begs for that kind of very stationary profile. So in that sense, yeah, I think that they're very different ships.
And I didn't play the Richelieu, so pass.
You see, the interesting thing is you said that, you played the Richelieu. I played it very mobile, but I can understand where you're coming from because the guns are in the front, right? So you would think you'd get to a position and that's where you would go. But I think that takes away the biggest thing from the French battleships, and that's the mobility. And yes, the Richelieu's guns are in the front, but if you get that ship on the flank, just like the Gascogne, you could cause a lot of problems. But it's just interesting to see how different they are when they're sisters, right? From what I remember,
so Gascogne was going to be a modification of the Richelieu.
And then there was also the Strasbourg and the Jean Bart, I believe, were the other two.
So I think the Strasbourg was the Dunkirk a Dunkirk class, I think, and then the Jean Bart was an upgraded.
Which maybe that comes, that's all speculation. I don't even get it, but I just feel like you can play them kind of the same, but I think you're right in the sense of the Richelieu has to play a little bit more bow on. But I think the problem that I had with it was it took a lot of damage sitting bow on.
Well, both of them.
So I think that I think that's why it's better if you use the speed and get to the side. But I think everyone's going to have their different play style with it, and we'll just have to see how, is the Gascogne going to keep, are they going to keep changing it, or is it going to come out this way? We don't know. But, I kind of like what they did with the Zeppelin and the way they fix it. So maybe they could use the Gascogne as their test for that, like the way they did that, seeing what they could do to make it different. Because they're not going to add an extra gun. I know people have asked if they're going to add they're not going to add an extra turret, so don't even ask.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I like that there is a little bit more incentive to get Gascogne over just playing the line ships. And I do think that Gascogne, particularly when it's top tier, it is quite an interesting battleship to play. But when it is bottom tier, it struggles, I think, even harder than Bismarck and Tirpitz do.
Yeah, and they've had a recent release of a few premiums. We talked about them before in previous shows that they've done a decent job of making the premiums different and not overpowered. They're not a Belfast or anything like that. So I think on that note, Gascogne being so different is a good thing for people that are looking for something that way. But as a player that has played so many games, all of us in this room, do you think it's a ship that you would just take out and play for fun, or do you think it's a ship that maybe once in a while or maybe never?
So I think that it's a ship that if I didn't have other ways to get, so this kind of goes back to the fact that we got the elite commander XP. So I can get commander XP on any of my 19-point captains and then transfer it to another captain. So before that was the case, I would have said I would play Gascogne because I would need points to put on my French captains. But now that I don't need that, it kind of eliminates the need for me to play Gascogne.
And for me, I mean, oh man. So what I usually do is there another tier 8 battleship that I would rather play? And when it comes to the Gascogne, I would say absolutely. Because Tirpitz, Bismarck, any Tirpitz, like battleships for me is you grab map control, you project map control wherever you are, and then you tank damage and you dish it out, and then you push or you fall back depending on how pressured you are. The Gascogne can't do that. And that's pretty much where it turns into, like, even you said play for fun or just play it for a few games. Since I can't play it like I want to play my battleships, I would say no for me. Like, I'd much rather hop in any other tier 8 battleship that can handle itself like a battleship. Like, if I want to do Speedy Gonzalez flank shooting, then I'll play, I don't know, a cruiser, an Atago. That's way more proficient at the only thing that Gascogne has really is it kind of performs like a cruiser, but it doesn't really have the concealment or the torpedoes or any of the other utility that you want from a cruiser. So that's my 2 cents from the limited amount of games that I played with it, I should add.
That makes sense. I mean, when you think about it, when you want to play a battleship, you want to play a battleship. And I don't know if Gascogne really fits, like you said, the battleship, profile. And when Tier 8 has a lot of battleships. I mean, it has a lot of good battleships, a lot of battleships that play completely different. But would it rank towards the top of what I'd want to play? No. Why would I play that when I could just go get, if I want to do flank, I could just go get into an Amagi, with bigger guns and, more of them. If I wanted to sit, and kind of control the cap area or a certain part of the map, the North Carolina is great at that. If I want to go get into a cap and, be that secondary guy, you got the Bismarck and Tirpitz. And then there's the lowly Monarch, but whatever. But, but I see your point that it doesn't seem on the outside to do anything better than any of the other battleships. So why would you want to, limit yourself with that? So makes perfect sense to me.
Fair enough. Well, let's move on to yet another premium. Inspired by Farazella and Fem, I scratched the itch and took the final Graf Zeppelin test version for a spin this weekend and this week a little bit. I went so far as to actually write up my feelings on Reddit and the forums yesterday, in which I kind of detailed why playing the 1-2-1 setup was so much fun for me and why Enterprise is so awful to see on the enemy team when you do. It might be slightly overtuned, but I feel like Graf Zeppelin is finally what she should be. So I'm curious what you guys feel about where Graf Zeppelin kind of ended up.
Already, she's gone through the ringer as far as trying to make it work in a both fun way for the players fighting against it and the people using it. And just as I don't play carriers unless I'm drunk, and somehow Twitch chat triggers me to play carriers. And I don't know, man. So I upgraded the torpedoes. I used the deep water torps on the Graf Zeppelin, unbeknownst to me, and then I saw a DD, and I tried to drop it. And then it's like, okay, so that's how that works. So that should tell you something. As far as the normal build without the deep water torps, have yet to try that. But I have a huge issue with AP bombers. I detest them almost. I think they are it's a very skill-less way of just getting high damage. Just especially the Graf Zeppelin's little drop circle. If you can time it well and you get the bombs through the deck armor and into the Citadel, you can do some crazy stuff. And that's even if you just click for them to attack by themselves without even manually dropping. I don't know, man. AP bombs is not my cup of tea. And yeah. Kami?
Well, here's one of the things. I played it this morning before we actually started doing this, and I hit a Friedrich for, I don't know, it was like 58,000 with AP bombs or something, crazy like that. My whole thing with the Graf Zeppelin, I like the process they've gone through. I mean, we remember it was bad, and then it got a little better, and then it was bad. It's been through everything. Yeah.
Well, it was super overpowered.
It started off
one,
really good. Overpowered. Then it got really bad when they changed it the first time. It's been through a lot of changes. But my thing with it is when you take the deep water torpedoes, and since it has AP bombs, you really take yourself out of the game of supporting your team, if that makes sense. Because you can't deal with DDs. So why you're not even most people aren't gonna look for them. And then the AP bombs, you're only looking for certain ships, right? Like that's my thinking when I have the AP bombs. I'm looking for German battleships. I'm looking for ships that I know the AP bombs are going to do great amount of damage to. And then you have the one giant fighter squad that against a Lexington. I played against a couple Lexingtons, and it was phenomenal. They got a fighter, you got a fighter, you got more, right? You unless weird things go on, you typically beat the Lexington. But against an Enterprise, good luck. I mean, surely I say good luck.
No, Enterprise was a fucking nightmare. And I shouldn't probably say that, but yeah, it was a nightmare to play against.
It's like, I guess, playing against a Saipan in Tier 7 carriers, right? You can't really handle those fighter squads all too well. There's few of them, but they sting, right? But as far as... I think the main issue that I have with AP bombs and the focus on carriers being high alpha instead of consistent but moderate damage is, especially when it comes to AP bombs. Like if you want to land a slam dunk battleship AP salvo, you need to have good positioning, good situational awareness, and hold your salvo. Like you need to time it, right? You need to figure out like, this is when I need to shoot. And in order for me to get to that situation, maybe I need to hold fire, go into concealment, and all these other factors. With AP bombs, it's just, who do I want to click? Who do I want to click now?
I and it's tough, right? Because I'm not none of us in here are CV players, right? But we also know how the game works. We play the game long enough. We know what balanced looks like. We know what unbalanced looks like. And I really feel a 10 bomber, I think it's 10, right? It's 10 bombers, 9 or 10. Once you have the captain skill worth of bombs attacking, and I know I only attacked Bismarcks, Tirpitz, Friedrichs, Kerfurt, you know what I mean? Like targets that I knew those AP bombs would just devastate. And when you do 50,000 damage just clicking on a battleship, and it's not like what can the battleship do against it? I don't know.
The biggest complaint that I see people making is that even if there is an active defensive fire consumable going on, you can still hit that battleship.
That same game I was up against that Lexington, he popped his defensive fire, and I hit him for 27,000 damage through the defensive fire with AP bombs. Because the whole thing about defensive fire is it makes that reticle get bigger. But when you look at the reticle originally, it's a tiny dot. And then when the defensive fire activates, it's still a pretty tiny dot. I mean, it's still barely wider than the ships that you're targeting, so.
Well, and if you try and use the manual, like if you get a good manual drop, it's devastating.
That Friedrich that I hit knocked out his engine and did 50-some thousand damage to him with bombs. And what is he supposed to do to it? But
and I found that they were relatively effective against all the battleships in the matchmaking spread. Even the ones that like the American and the Japanese ones still took very good damage from those AP bombers, unlike the US ones.
I dropped on, let's see, a Friedrich, a Bismarck, a Colorado, some other ships, but the Colorado took good damage. The Friedrich took great damage. I mean, it's very interesting to see that that's where they've gone with AP bombs. And I do feel like they perform better than the USN AP bombs. And that's saying something because we've seen the videos and all the tales of watching the AP bombs from the Midway, just Dev Strike Des Moines and everything like that. But I can you imagine if there was more than one squadron on the Graf Zeppelin? And if they ever decide to make a German CV line, if that's the line that it comes out with, I mean, it's going to be absolutely terrible for battleship players. And I would say cruiser players, because as far as I know, the bombs do pretty well against them as well.
They do, or at least some cruisers that they don't overpen. But again, if you want to do 50k to Friedrich der Große with your battleship, it takes planning. With AP bombs, it takes clicks and maybe making sure that your fighters or your planes don't get caught up in too much AA, or you're evading the opposing carriers' fighters. That's about it. And that's the issue that I have with it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And here's the thing, right? How do you balance carriers in the game? And I know this is a big thing.
Oh, boy.
It's been a big thing. It's been a big thing for a while.
I thought we were going to talk about other things in the podcast, but I guess we're going to do
this topic.
The rest of it with this. No.
Well, here's the thing. We'll go over real quick. How do they balance carriers in the game? How do they do it?
I don't know. It's like this is such a huge question that
the only thing that
every
I can
time
think
I
of
sit
that
down
would
to
be
think about it, my head
for
explodes.
both parties, both the people that are being dropped and the carriers, as well as keeping the skill ceiling high, and also to a point raising the skill floor a bit, is going away from high alpha strikes. It's going away from deep water torpedoes and AP bombs, right? The big punch. And then maybe increasing the amount of squadrons, but dropping their damage or their dot damage. And that will keep high skill CVs it's still going to be something to achieve because you need better micro. But you're not going to get dev struck out by a high tier carrier because, I don't know, there was nothing close to you that could help you with AA. That's like my only thought that I have on there.
Yeah. They're talking about the revamp, and just the fact that it didn't get done last year tells me that maybe it's a more thorough revamp than we can kind of comprehend, which to me means that they might change everything about carriers, that nothing that we know now would apply. And if that's the case, I don't know where it's going to go.
They still need to be in the game, I think. If only because they play such a huge part in naval warfare, especially in the time period that the game covers. So they kind of need to be there. But I mean, I've talked to some very, very competent carrier, and we've talked about everything from how they are now and how they can balance around that to what I said with more squadrons, less damage, and even maybe just completely going away with deplaning carriers. They have infinite amount of planes, and then revamping the AA around that, because it's like this race for resources, whether that is defensive AA fire cooldown or running out of defensive AA versus the amount of planes the carrier has. So I think people that are less informed, but they scream nerf or buff carriers, don't really know how much that implies. You can't just flat nerf carriers without looking at all the AA of most of the ships, or vice versa. Like you try to balance AA, but then you need to like fix carriers. So it's like this huge issue. It's probably one of the bigger ones that the developers have. How to balance ships around carriers, or lack thereof. So
that I completely agree with. And before we get too far down this particular rabbit hole, let's move on to Asashio. And so for the last week, the CCs have been kind of laughing maniacally. I mean, testing the deep water torpedoes on Asashio. Well, the setup feels a little gimmicky and can kind of swing from overpowered to nigh useless, depending on the matchmaking. I still feel like unique ships like Asashio bring some much needed diversity to the game. And frankly, her 5.4 kilometer concealment at tier 8 is powerful all by itself. And even before we start talking about things like torpedo acceleration on the deep water torpedoes. So I guess, where are you guys at with Asashio? Do you want to see her in the game like she is now? Do you want minor changes to her, buffs, nerfs, whatever? Or would you prefer to see her completely revamped from the deep water version?
So the Gascogne, right? I felt like it had a lack of identity, and I feel the same thing about the Asashio. It's a destroyer that pretty much the sole purpose of it is punishing battleships. But in the current game, destroyers have this huge role that they need to do, which is map control, cap control. And the Asashio with deep water torps, which can only hit battleships and carriers, combined with really poor gun handling, makes it a destroyer that just doesn't fit. And I wouldn't play it for the same reason I wouldn't play the Gascogne. Because I play a destroyer to play a destroyer. I play it for cap control or map control or team utility in a sense. And I feel like the Asashio just doesn't translate into that.
Well, that's the thing about the 5.4 kilometer concealment makes cap control possible. You're not going to fight destroyers, but you are going to outspot them. And when I played her in caps with that 5.4 kilometer concealment. And because she gets torpedo reload boost and the smoke, you can aggressively punish the battleships and cap. You just can't fight the other destroyers. So I kind of disagree with you on at least some level.
I can see
there.
that point. I do. But like between a Benson and an Asashio, the concealment difference is 400 meters, which is significant, but it's significant for a few seconds before you cover that distance in a more gun-oriented DD, which means if I get spotted and I don't spot the DD spotting me, I would look at the team lineup as like, only the Asashio has that only it can outspot me. Well, let me just push in for 2.5 seconds, 4 seconds, and there's the spot. So passively, in a sense, you can cap control with the Asashio, but against a competent DD on the other side, not really. You're going to be forced to use your smoke, and then you're going to sit in your smoke with your subpar guns, and then just hope that your team can bail you out. Because, yeah.
Okay. I want to point you back towards, we had, if you remember the before we had mono tier ranked, there was a rank 7 season where you could play rank 6 or tier 6 or tier 7 ships. And people started playing Mutsuki in the tier 7, even though she was a tier 6, because of her concealment and the ability for her to spot for her team, which is what I was doing and when I wasn't capping, and not be counter spotted, made Mutsuki very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'll let you cut in here. I just want to
is in the same
counterpoint
vein
this, I guess, is that in ranked, like we have to make a distinction between ranked and randoms, because in ranked, everyone knows that if we snap shoot DDs and we apply enough damage, we have a higher chance of winning. In random battles, your average Joe Schmo in his battleship is not going to go like, oh, that DD spotted, but it's at 15 kilometers. why don't I just shoot this Yamato instead? Or why don't I just... So I get your point. I really do. But I think it's also, you have to make the distinction between ranked and randoms. Sorry about that, Kami. Go ahead.
Oh, you're good. And you also got to remember that the Matsuki could also torp other DDs, which the Asashio can't.
No, I get that. I'm just saying that I think that there's more to Asashio than
I know for a fact that it's great going down the 2 line and torping a ranger.
Oh God,
I did that. But I think you both have great points. My whole thing with this ship is, what is the one thing that we always see IGN DDs not do? And
cap.
Correct. And this DD, literally the way it's designed right now, with its terrible gun handling and its inability to torp other DDs, it is literally telling players you can't fight other DDs. And I really don't like that in a DD, and I understand it has torpedoes that you can shoot halfway across the map, and more than likely you're going to hit a bunch of battleships that are just sitting there. But is that really good for the health of the game, in the sense of, and randoms is different, right? Like in competitive play, would this ever work with CVs kind of in the mix when it comes to like King of the Sea or anything like that? I don't think so. But in random play, is this really what you want to see? Because we all know, how many times have we said, oh, look, there goes the Shimakaze off to the 2 line to try to get around and torp the enemies. This ship literally is saying to do that the way I feel. That's how I feel the way it's designed.
I think that that's a worst case scenario. And I agree that a lot of people are going to see it that way. But I also think that there are other ways to play it if people have the foresight to see it. Now, will the vast amount of the player base do that? I don't know. Probably not. I think you're probably right about the vast amount of the player base, but I do think that there are ways to play the ship that aren't on the 2 line or on the 9 line. But the other thing that I wanted to throw in here about this ship is that I actually had some reasonable success fighting DDs in the late game with the guns, because I had not taken damage at any point throughout the game. And even though the guns, I absolutely agree, handle terribly, they still have a relatively high alpha. And so I was able to surprise kill a Kagero and another a Mahan. The question is, because he didn't expect me to ever shoot.
I can see that, but I also think that it's a DD that when you're, if another DD, say you have a DD on your team fighting another DD, you're a great DD to help support, right? But you never want to be the first DD into the gunfight, especially if it's 2 DDs that are full health, just because you're going to lose that fight. But I can see where you say, because you have the low detection, and say there's a low HP Mahan or something in the area, you can go pick on it because your alpha's good. But I just feel like a lot of players, because we got to think of the average player here, right? Because that's who's more than likely going to have these. Are they going to understand how that part of the game works? That they can't just sail into a cap, start shooting, fire their deep water torpedoes, and then they wonder why they die, instead of using their concealment. We understand how these ships are going to work, but the average player for this is not going to.
Yeah, and I would call myself an average or even below average destroyer player. So, but I think one of the things that excited me about Asashio is that it was in the same vein as Graf Zeppelin, is both of those ships made me play better. Like Graf Zeppelin made me use my strafes because I needed to survive. Asashio made me really understand what the concealment is and what I could and couldn't do, and what my limitations were. It was the first time you were really put up against what that ship could do.
Those disadvantages, correct?
I mean, I've played destroyers before, but
that makes sense.
This one was just, like I said, I was just saying it was making me better while I was playing. So, did you guys have any final thoughts on Asashio before we move on, or we kind of beat it to
this is like, if they want to introduce a tier 8 Japanese destroyer premium, I'm all aboard. But there is that one ship that used to be tier 8. It used to be regarded as no. It used to be that thing.
If you say kamikaze, good
Kitakami.
The Kitakami?
Or not kamikaze, the massive torpedo boat.
Tier 3 hull cruiser with just torpedoes everywhere. No, but the Fubuki, the old Fubuki. I would love if they reintroduced the old Fubuki. And if they want to play around with deep water torps, that's cool. But the old Fubuki, that has the same gun layout, because the Asashio has the 2 turrets in the back and the one in the front, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But the old Fubuki used to have the 15-kilometer torps or something, I think it was. Or maybe it was not on that platform. But introduce that again, because it has the 3 launchers with the 3 tubes
like
per, which gives you a lot of flexibility. If you want to shoot 2 salvos and hold the third, it's like a Shima, but with 2 tubes less on each launcher. And then tweak the gun handling a little bit, so it's not going to be better than a gun-oriented DD, but it can hang, much like a Shima can hang against a Fletcher or a Gearing because of the high damage and because of the rear-facing firepower. So you can kind of kite away if you get caught. That's a premium Japanese destroyer that would excite me. The Asashio, just no, it doesn't do what it needs to do. Not for me.
Fair enough. Well, several videos were created this week by various people in the community regarding the data mine stats on the upcoming Tier 9 Russian cruiser Kronstadt. Well, we talked about her a little bit last week with Arun. A few things stood out to me about the data mine stats. First, the combination of the relatively high shell speed, the good corrupt value on the shell, and the low detonation timer is going to make her kind of a cruiser killing machine, because they're going to penetrate the cruiser armor and detonate before over-penetrating. Second, those same properties are going to hurt bow-on battleships when they're fired at into the superstructure. So it's going to be able to hurt, these ships that go bow onto it, even though its fire chance is really not that great on its HE. And then finally, her lack of armor is going to make her very vulnerable to getting hit for massive damage, kind of like Minotaur is, just with even more hit points. So we don't know what Stalingrad, which is kind of going to be the advanced tier 10 version of this ship, will bring yet. But what do you guys think of these kinds of battle cruisers? And they really are, even though they're called cruisers in the game, they are really the Sir Jackie Fisher's Royal Navy's version of battle cruisers, essentially battleship guns on a cruiser hull. What do you think of that kind of thing being thrown into the tier 9 and 10 meta? In particular for you, Isa, what would that have meant you saw a ship like that in KOTS previously?
I can't really put into context just from hypotheticals and data mine stats. Usually you can, if I would have seen it, if I would have played it a bit, I can kind of put it into like, oh, how will this fit into a competitive meta, if you would. I don't know, man. Competitive is all about doing whatever little damage you can when you can. It's all about consistency. If you have to shoot with just your one turret towards that cruiser and you're in your battleship and you have a small chance of hitting in, you have to do it. So it's all about consistency. And you talked about superstructure being vulnerable on battleships, for example, especially when they're bow on. I mean, damn. That depletes kind of fast. It loses like the high damage you can deal to a superstructure after the module saturation kicks in. Actually, with it exploding inside, even on a saturated module, it's going to deal decent damage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it'll start doing over penetration damage. So it's never not going to do damage. It's just going to deplete the superstructure hit points. Now, some of these tier 9 and 10 battleships, they have an enormous amount of hit points in those, up to like
that is true.
A quarter of the total.
I don't know, man. I think I'm more okay
available
with
to hit
cruisers pretending to be battleships than I do with battleships pretending to be cruisers. I.e., we talked about the Gascogne, so that's one, and then the tier 9 and tier 10 Royal Navy battleships. I'm more than okay with cruisers having bigger guns, more health, like being kind of a middle ground, I guess, than I do with battleships being squeezed into roles that are detrimental to the overall health of the game, I suppose, such as the Conqueror. But to answer your question about how this would work in competitive, I can't answer that until I get some hands-on or I see the ship in action.
How about you, Kami? Did the data mine stats?
I'm still in a wait and see mode. I mean, the data mine stats are kind of a wait and see mode, but I got to really get the feeling for the ship and when I play it, and hands-on's the best way to figure out how the ship's going to play. And I mean, with the stats and how much HP it has, I mean, on the outside it looks okay, but you just never know. You don't know how the ship's going to handle. You don't know how the ship's going to, respond to battle situations. You just don't know. So I think it comes down to, like Isa said, we just gotta kind of wait and see until we get to play it. And when it comes to competitive meta, whether that be King of the Sea or clan battles or whatever, I mean, we're just gonna have to wait and see, because I mean, clan battles you wouldn't be able to use, I don't believe, because it's tier 9. So I would think that would kind of negate that one.
Right, but we are going to get Stalingrad, and while Stalingrad isn't like a direct part of the Kronstadt class, it is going to have 12-inch guns.
I guess it's just going to come down to
probably have a similar number
more
of
of the consumables, right? Is it going to have a radar? What is it going to have? Because that was the reason why the Moskva, besides its HP pool, was played, was the radar. Now, if the Stalingrad comes into the game and doesn't have a radar, even having, say, 15,000 more HP and bigger guns, is that enough to offset not being able to see the cap? There's...
So I will say that
for what we know,
I have no idea about
no,
but Kronstadt does not have a radar.
Yeah.
From the current data mine stats. Now that's all subject to massive change. And even after we get the first version of it, it's subject to change.
I've said this before.
Still,
I'm all about
for right now. It does
ships
not
that have a lot of utility. And if it doesn't have that utility, I don't see it. I don't see it making it in. But we don't know because it's all data mined. Stalingrad, we don't really have an idea on. So we'll have to just wait and like I said earlier, just have to wait and see.
I
where it goes.
Just hypothetically and living in the minds of the data, I am pleasantly surprised to AP, man. It's good that we're taking a step towards AP, whether that be through short fuse or higher velocity. They need to be very careful with how they do it, but with the game having settled right now into a very HE focused meta, more AP. That's only a good thing if it's done in moderation. Because I remember the good old days of closed beta where there weren't any low underwater on a few ships, but like for the most part, it was very hardcore in the sense that if you gave broadside, you were going to hurt a lot. Especially true for cruisers. Oh yeah.
I remember sailing around with no turrets on the Yamato.
Turret on.
But yeah, I agree. The switching, the Conqueror is always the one that I look at and I'm like, man, what did they do? Because a good player can get 250,000 damage in it. An average player could still get over 100,000 just shooting HE, and that's really not where I want to see the game go. I want to see battleships be battleships and cruisers be cruisers, and cruisers have the option to use AP or HE when necessary. But battleships, I feel like, should be shooting AP. They're a battleship, right? They shouldn't just be sitting in the back at 24 kilometers shooting.
For
AP.
sure. So after a little bit, what I would call a step in the wrong direction with the Royal Navy battleships, taking a step back and figuring out like how can we make AP? How can we reintroduce AP in a new way? That would be interesting and fresh to me. So if they want to use the Kronstadt and the Stalingrad as kind of test platforms for that, I'm all aboard.
Fair enough. Well, we have some quick hits from the patch 0.7.2 PTS patch notes that were posted this week. So we're going to get a new French-based campaign with ship locks for kind of the higher tasks. So like French battleships for some of them, or Eagle for a couple. Permacamo for IJN ships will have 2 color schemes for people who unlock it in the Yamamoto campaign, which is something I was actually surprised wasn't there when I did unlock it in the Yamamoto campaign. And I'm really happy to see that you're going to have more than one permacamo option for when you spend the doubloons for something like Yamato or Shimakaze or things like that. Atlantic and Warrior's Path are getting some minor map adjustments. Warrior's Path is getting a couple of islands in the A cap, which I think will give the people at least a few options for capping that without with having some cover. Changes to detonation mechanics will make you unable to detonate if you have more than 75% of your hit points. Note, this is confirmed to be after shell damage takes place, so if a shot takes you to 73% damage, it can make you detonate. Some improvements are coming to visual effects and help for players running 4K clients by letting them make the minimap bigger, which I think is cool because some people playing in 4K have a real hard time with the UI and scalability. So that brings us to our last topic for the day, and it will be a little bit more speculative. We've talked a lot about various premium ships over the existence of the podcast, and even today we've talked about 3 of them. But today we're going to take a step back and ask some bigger questions. So what should a premium be? What makes one good or bad? Should they be unique, or should they be similar to the ships that are
we had
of
another
the same
3
nation?
hours, you said?
So Izolate, as the guest, why don't you start? We start off with you.
No. I mean, premium ships in World of Warships. We've seen some real bad ones, as in too strong. Starting from for sure too weak. But what should a premium ship be like? For me, it should be fun, right? It should either offer something unique, which is a good selling point. Because I'm not a naval warfare enthusiast. I know the basics, right? But you couldn't like show me a picture of a ship. It's like, oh, what ship is this? From which nation? Which year? So for me, it's all about how do they work in game. And when I say fun, that's a very subjective thing. So for example, I don't know. I think the last ranked season showed like the Loyang. That's just better than a Benson, pretty much. I don't think that's needed. I think that's bad. That's not the way they want to go with it. I don't know what they want to go with it, but that's not what I want them to go with. Like side grades, because something that I never take into account when it comes to premium is what the earning rates. Because I don't have a credit problem. I don't have a captain skill problem. I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to care about that part of the game, the economy, the balloons, since I did the streaming thing. So I don't really care about that part. But the main part is that they need to be interesting. They need to be fun, without being over the top, pretty much.
Oh boy, the premium talk.
What about you, Kami?
I feel like some of the premiums they've released were overpowered, and were told they were overpowered and still released. I mean, the prime example that I think of is the Belfast, right? I mean, what does the Belfast do wrong? It doesn't have a heel. That's right. And torpedoes. That's like the only thing, but it does everything else so well. Smoke, whatever. And then you have some underpowered premiums. I mean, I don't think the Krispy Kreme with AFT could get out to like 16 and a half kilometers on range. Like, just good luck hitting anything, but it's there. But yeah, there are premiums that are underpowered, but a premium I feel shouldn't necessarily be head and shoulders above a ship that's, available to everybody in the game. Now there are some premiums that are exceptions to this case. I would say the Flint and the Black, because you have to earn them. They should be good because you have to actually do something to earn them. And then you look at like the Missouri and the Musashi because you have to pay so much for them. I feel like they should be okay. But when you look at the Tirpitz and the Bismarck, a lot of people like the Bismarck, and it's it's in the tech tree ship. And a lot of people like the Tirpitz, but if you think about both of them together, they do a lot of the same things well. Yeah, I mean, yes, the Tirpitz, has torps, but the Tirpitz has torps, but really they do a lot of the same things the same. Like I feel like the guns handle pretty well, like the same, and they do a lot of the same. When you look at other comparisons of ships that have a premium and a non-premium version, I don't know if they all do that. But you bring up
I was going to bring up the Tirpitz and the Bismarck because that's. Especially after they I don't know, fixed the Tirpitz secondary range to match that of the Bismarck. It's like it's two sides of the same coin, just that the one side you have the torpedoes and the other side you have the hydro. And the hydro allows you to be aggressive, and so does the torpedo in their own right. Like, I think that's the perfect way to look at premiums. That's not talking about when the Tirpitz was released and it was the only battleship with torpedoes. And that made it unique, and people were crying about how just having this one battleship with torpedoes and you have to pay for it was, the spiel, right? So, but if we want to bring it, let's bring it back to Asashio. Let's kick it while it's down. That's a ship that gets the two things that a equivalent DD does not get. It gets smoke and torp reload booster. I think that's the wrong way to go about doing it. I think it should also get to choose between the two, because otherwise it has that thing that sets it apart too much from the normal tech tree equivalent.
See, I kind of disagree with you in one thing here. As I think that a premium should be better than tech tree things in a way, but have a serious weakness that offsets it. So like it is. So I like to see premium ships as specialist ships where I like when they are able to do something really, really well, but then they have to give up something important to be able to do that thing well. And I think that whereas, I like to see line ships be kind of generalists. So in that sense, I think that I agree with Kami that the Belfast is too good at too many things to be a premium, because it doesn't really have a whole lot of weakness. But I also think that, and whether or not that Asashio is too far off one end or not,
yeah, it makes perfect sense.
But the concept,
it's not so much the Asashio in particular. It's more like,
but it also has a weakness. Does that make sense?
Because it has the weakness. We talked about them earlier in this podcast, like the bad guns, torps that can't hit DDs. It's just the principle of this premium ship gets a little bit more. It gets both options of both the smoke and the torp reload booster. And that's kind of where it turns into like this, I don't know. It feels a little bit iffy for me.
I guess, Colin, where are you?
I
at
like
with the
premiums
idea of being specialist type,
but
things?
I don't like premiums. Like being a specialist ship is cool, but I don't want to see ships that are premiums that'll cost you real money being too far over, if that makes sense. Like over the top. Like I feel like the Belfast is way over the top. The Kutuzov was pretty over the top.
I do feel the Kutuzov has been knocked down a few pegs because of the changes to smoke. One of the things that Kutuzov used to be able to do is kind of push close to somebody, smoke up, and just pummel them and kind of hold a cap. But I have a lot harder time holding caps in Kutuzov now that I can be seen at, I think it was 7 kilometers.
And they have done a pretty good job of going away from, I would say some of the premiums of the game that are overpowered would be like the Belfast, definitely the Belfast. The Kutuzov has been knocked down a little bit. The Kamikaze in all of its variations was very. I still think it's very overpowered. Maybe I'm the only one who thinks that, but I feel like having 68 kilometer torps, whatever, and 5.4 concealment and 40-second reload is kind of, especially I think it's overpowered in the sense of where it's at on the tech tree and the ships that it sees and the players that it sees. Other than that, I mean, I just want to see consistency in the making of premiums. If you're going to make premiums that are going to consistently be better than their tech tree versions, hey, that's okay. But they got to stay consistent. You can't go like good premium, crappy premium, good. You got to keep it consistent. If you're going to make them equivalent to their tech tree versions, then, giving them something different, like a skill or something is fine. But you got to stay consistent. And like the Asashio, like ISO said, you get the best of both worlds. Plus you get deep water torps. So that's three different things really that make it stand out, which it's a premium, which I get. But what is going to make you want to play the tech tree equivalent of that ship? I believe it's the Kagero. But you got to think too, if you're going to charge as a business, if you're going to charge money for a ship or a tank or anything, it's got to have something that wants to intrigue people to buy it. So I get that side too.
So I guess I want to flip this discussion on its head a little bit, and we can go back to ISO. Is what do you feel about premiums like Alabama and Massachusetts, and to some degree Duke of York, which are not necessarily clones, but certainly very close to ships that are in and don't have a lot of separation from ships that are in the tech tree?
Is that you have the historical ships that people want to buy because they know of it. Maybe they had a grandfather that served on it. Such as the Roma, for example. It's like top of the line Italian battleship, and it had a history. And then you have the other side of premium ships, where you get what we were talking about, the weird and the quirky and the sometimes too powerful. Like I think that there's almost a division between those two type of sales of premiums. You have the ships that go by their notoriety, and then you have the ships that go by something that you get something tangible in game when you buy them instead of just a historical ship. And I think both is fine. I think, but I say that I think both is fine, but if I'm going to be completely honest, there is very few instances where I would play a Roma over North Carolina. But that's just me as a player. Like I have no connections with the Roma. I would just play, I don't know, I guess I'm a bit of a min-maxer, so I would play the most effective that I can. And the Roma doesn't really tick those boxes for me, so I would play something else.
Yeah, you would play the ship that you feel most comfortable in, and the ship that you feel can do what you need to do the best. I'm the same way, And when I think of ships like Kaloran brought up the Alabama and the Massachusetts, That's a perfect example of, I think we've been screaming for this since at least closed beta, of having the ability to change the name on your ship. You know, and I don't know if you guys were part of that talk, but we've been screaming about that forever, about, you know, being able to be like the Iowa is actually the New Jersey. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
something of that nature. But I think the Massachusetts and the Alabama, I think we did the numbers, and maybe some of the AAs a little bit different, but is that enough for someone to go spend, what is it, $55 or whatever it is on a tier 8 premium? Is that enough of a difference? The name and a small change to certain things enough for someone to be like, I want to buy that ship, which for some people it may be because they're collectors, or like you said, they have a connection. But to me, is that a premium? To me, that's just releasing another ship of the same sort, you know, the same type.
Like, I think it's enough to go buy to buy the first one. Like, I think there's enough of a difference between Alabama and North Carolina, and enough of a difference between Massachusetts and North Carolina.
But I mean,
to buy
between the
one
North Carolina and the Alabama, you
but
have
is there enough
a
to buy
significant
both of them?
There is significant differences. Like the Alabama's torpedo is like light years ahead of the North Carolinas. So that, like, if you're divisioning up with people and you want to be more aggressive, which probably means you're going to put yourself in harm's way as far as torpedoes go, then I would play the Alabama over the North Carolina. So, like, there's tweaks that they can make without having to throw in a consumable that the normal tech tree ships doesn't get. I think there's enough variables that they can fiddle around with in order to make it interesting and to encourage purchasing.
Well, and when you think about it, the Alabama and the North Carolina, like Kalorna said, there's enough differences, not just in the way they play, but just differences. Like you said, the Alabama has a better torque belt. The guns don't handle as well as the North Carolina. The AA has different strengths. You know, there's enough there to set the Alabama apart from the North Carolina, but is there enough to set the Alabama apart from the Massachusetts? And I think that's where the lines get a little blurred with premiums. I feel like the Massachusetts is just an Alabama. You know,
well, maybe the better analogy is to talk about the difference between is Prinz Eugen worth buying if you aren't a history buff? Because the difference between Prinz Eugen and Hipper, apart from the captain XP bonus if you buy the special camo,
that's true.
I think we come back to the same thing, that the Prinz Eugen and the Hipper, they're close enough to each other that they would kind of fall into that historical bracket of premium ships, if you want to call it that. We have to make a fancy name for it, I think. But, I mean, there is room enough in the game for both. However, I can see how certain people, probably myself included, would feel a bit robbed if you're looking at something, I don't know, like the Kutuzov, for example, if we want to take an extreme example. And you would look at that tier 8 premium, it's like, man, and what do we have on the German side? Oh, the Prinz Eugen, which is basically just a Hipper with an eagle on it, you know? So there is probably merit to both, but there is not enough of a merit for me personally.
Now, here's the thing. What would you do if the Prinz Eugen had a heel? Would that be enough? Would that be enough to set it apart from the Hipper? Would that?
Yeah.
So you look at
Absolutely.
You look at Atago.
I mean, this is a completely different argument because I think
right?
all tier 8 cruisers should have a heel, all of them. Yeah,
I'm getting to that point. You know, because when you think about it with a battleship, if you hit a cruiser broadside, there are specific cases, the Chapayev's one that is very annoying to shoot at, but most cruisers you shoot broadside, you in a battleship you're gonna depth strike them or make them to the point where
you make them
you won't see them for the rest of the game. And I can see where you're going with that point, but I mean, when you think of the Eugen is a name. That's all that ship is in this game. There is nothing on that. Yeah. Okay, you get a cool camo.
It is.
And a cool camo.
Is that enough for you to be like, I'm going to go spend $50 on the Prinz Eugen because I'm a history buff and that's it? For some, yes. But for a player that knows that both of them play the same and there's no really inherent difference, for me, that'd be a no. But there's many type of people that play this game. There's people that love to collect all the premiums. There's historical people. You know, there's people that are like, oh, that's the Prinz Eugen. That was with the Bismarck. I'm going to have both. You know, there's a lot of different types of people. So, but I feel like the Prinz Eugen, and I've said this since the Prinz Eugen came out, that it needs something to make it feel like a premium. You know, because it doesn't have anything. Other ships have, Kutuzov has smoke. Atago has a heel. I mean, and they're on this. Yeah, so you're looking at other cruisers that all have
Belfast
these
has radar,
extra abilities
hydro,
that make
and-
them feel like they're a premium. The Prince Eugen, to me, when I play it just feels like I'm in a tier 8 cruiser
And I
that
think
should
this
just be in the
raises
country.
an interesting point, and something that I've talked about in length on stream, and that it's after the first few premium ships that introduced something new. So you have the Atago. That was the first ship that set premiums on this weird path of having to be different in a stronger way.
No heal.
Well, but I mean, the original Atago, the one from closed beta, did not have a heal, but it did have forward firing torpedoes. And that was enough of some of it to make it unique and make it fun to play. The vast majority of my Atago games are from that period of time. You know, maybe I don't have the greatest win rate from that period, but that was a unique way to make to make it a ship. So when they gave it a heal,
on that
it's
note
almost
specifically,
not,
I don't play the
weird
Belfast
to say, but
today.
it's almost not fun to play
because
I feel like it's almost too strong.
When you reach a certain point in this game, when you're just better than the majority of the player base, playing a ship like the Belfast, you just feel dirty because it's a ship that not all people will have because it's a premium. It's also a ship that has, like, you know, maybe that cruiser brings a wrench and the other one brings a hammer and the third one an axe. Belfast, you have all of them, and it's like it's not challenging to play because you're basically a fat DD with your concealment. So I'm with you on that point. Is that on the same reason you don't play the Atago, I don't play the Belfast.
Yeah, and you think about it, right? Some of the ships in this game, especially as many games as we played, you feel that way. The Belfast is definitely one of those ships that you're like, man, I could go out and I can average a Kraken in this ship because it's so easy. And that's alone. That's not even taking into account if you division up with your friends and you bring a DD that has smoke. I mean, you're invisible the whole game. You know, and if a DD comes close enough to try to spot you, you can radar and hydro him and you kill him in 2 salvos, especially at that tier. You know, so I'm with you there. And I feel like premiums as a whole, they need to have something that sets them apart from their tech tree variant, but I don't feel like they need everything. Like the Belfast has basically everything but a heal. The Atago, I mean, you can stealth torp in a cruiser. I mean, you can stealth torp in it. I mean, that's, you know, and think about it. We've all shot at them. Good Atago players are incredibly hard to kill, especially with their.
Yeah. Well, that's why Atago's so good in like a competitive seat, is because its concealment is really good. You can flank the crap
but then you
out of
have
stuff,
the opposite
and
end
you
of
get
the
a heal,
spectrum.
so you can operate independently.
Right? You're like, why would you ever, like, when I saw Eugens in ranked, I just laughed because I'm like, what are they bringing? What are they bringing? They have their concealment isn't any good. Their AA is good, but if you're spec to AA, I mean, what in ranked? I mean, what are you really doing? Because I mean, how many carriers do you see? Their guns, if you get a broadside cruiser, are awesome. Their HEs, whatever. Their reloads long. You know what I mean? Like, now, if that ship had a heal, you could easily go out on the flank because you could recoup some of that damage you took, just like the Atago. But you kind of look at it, you're like, what does it do that sets it apart as a premium? And it really doesn't do anything. And I think, you know, they've gone back an occasion and helped premiums, whether it be remove them from the game, like the Belfast and the Kutuzov, or Nikolai, or they've given them something to help them. And I feel like the Eugen is like the prime example of it needs something to help it. It's just a heal would probably be the best thing for it.
So that I agree with. So I guess the overall question here is: are you guys
happy
can
change anything
with
in
the path that premiums currently
we've
take in the game, or do you think that things need to change in the future?
That were introduced in the past. If they took a new line today and basically made what we've talked about being like historical premiums, like side grades, such as the Alabama to the North Carolina, if they started doing that, the premium sales would probably drop a whole bunch because we've been so ingrained up until this point that, oh, this new premium, it excites me because it's a DD that has hydro. Ooh, it's a cruiser at tier 8 that has a heal. Oh, that's good. That's good. Like, it's just objectively a good thing. It's not a side grade. It's just, I don't think there's any way for them to go back and start from the ground up with premium sales. Because, I mean, we've pretty much all of us said that premiums needs that little bit of extra spice. And usually the way you get that is through consumables or a game mechanic, like a cruiser having low concealment, like almost DD levels concealment. So yeah, it's like trying to balance carriers, man. There's no easy fix, because we've been playing this game the way it is now for such a long time that it just is what it is at this point.
What about you, Kami? And what do you feel? I guess I want to add one thing for Kami's response here is some premiums have been removed from the game and more or less permanently. What do you feel about that and the fact that these still remain in the game, but future players will never have access to?
Slap some people on the hands. People that sold those ships for doubloons, shame on you, because those are unique ships. Those are ships that they're not coming back, and you sold them, and But to answer your question, do I think it's it's quote unquote fair to new players in the game that don't get to see these ships or don't get an opportunity to buy them? I think yes, because I believe it was Wargaming trying to make amends to get rid of some ships that at the time when they were released, maybe they weren't seen as overpowered as they are now, but in the current state of the game, they are. But do I think Wargaming will continue to do that? I don't know if there's any premiums right now that fit that category, but I do know for a fact that the Kamikaze, the Nikolai, the Belfast, the Kudos, those ships were definitely ships that needed to go away, and honestly don't need to be seen again. I mean, it's tough because ISO hit it on the head. They can't just go back to square one with premiums now, because every new premium that's came out has had something that set it apart or tried to set it apart from other ships. And if you literally just go back to the beginning, you're like, all right, so we're going to start with a whole new structure on how premiums are built, and this is what we're going to do. Wargaming is going to look at it, and they're going to look at their pocketbook, and they're going to realize if we do this, we're going to lose a lot of money. And that's not their business. That they're not in the business of losing money, they're in the business of making money. So they've set themselves up on this path already with premiums, and it's like a new car, right? You want to see the shiny new car. You want it to have something that, oh man, this car has, self-parking or whatever it may be. That's what you want to see in new ships. And I think that's why some of the premiums that we've had or been able to test have kind of hit the back burner. We have a few that, haven't been talked about in forever or seen in game or anything. And I think that's kind of filling that void of ships like, oh man, these ships don't actually do anything that really, sets them apart, and I think that's where the game's kind of going is premiums have to keep doing something different, whether it be a consumable, which is the easiest way, I think, right? You just give it a different consumable. Like if they introduced a brand new tier 10 premium US cruiser, they could give it a longer radar, and that'd be enough for most people, right? To be like, oh yeah, I'm buying that. It has a longer radar than the Des Moines. That's where I think they're at right now. Well, they can't just go, like ISO said, go back in time and have a do-over.
Like we talked about the Prince Eugen. It's not like they can start making premium ships that behave like the Prince Eugen, because it's not going to sell. And that's the uncomfortable truth with the current state of premium ships, is that there is a power creep to them, but they can't do anything about it.
Fair enough. Well, Isaac, it was great having you on the show today, because it was great having some opinions that weren't, in line with what we normally
back and forth.
Some of us talking about. So it was really great being able to kind of not fight, but have
shine
some difference of opinion and kind of illuminate the different ways to look at the game.
And it's healthy, sense. And especially if you're trying to inform your listeners. I'm Izolate, Twitch TV/Izolate, Twitter. It's Izolate TV.
Is there any
I stream Warships a lot,
to do before we
and
close
I
it up
stream realistically. That's a word. I just made it. Combat games, squad, and RTS games, Men of War, stuff like that. Hit me up if that sounds interesting to you. And that's it. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed myself.
Oh, absolutely. No, it was great.
We got to figure out what we're going to do with these codes, Lauren.
Kami, did you have any announcements before we wrap up? Oh God, I still have. Oh man, I guys, keep a heads up, because in the next few days, Kami and I have codes we have got to get rid of.
We'll figure out something for you guys, and
so keep your eye on Twitter, keep your eye on Facebook.
We do want you guys to get these, and
for us to give these away.
Get rid of them. So
for sure. So that's it for this week, folks. Remember, our podcast episodes are now released on YouTube with listener gameplay as backdrop. If you do have a game, and would like to be featured on the podcast YouTube, please drop me an email at warshipspodcast@gmail.com. And you can either send me a replay, or if you want to be really awesome, you can do a shadow play on it yourself and send it to me like that, because then I don't have to record it. Thumbs up. With screenshots at the end, battle screen, and a brief summary of the game. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates between podcasts, just like those, codes that we might have to give away. And we, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next week.